Hello, welcome back to 4-5's Designs. It's Jay and this is the 5th part in a 5-step tutorial showing you how to crochet realistic looking roses like these that I've done here. The previous videos take you through the basic crochet stitches that you need to do, how to do the petals, the sepals, the leaves, and then this one covers how to put all those things together and assemble them into roses like this, including how to add, if you wish, and I'm trying to find it here, how to add raindrops to your roses. There's a cue for a song if ever there was one. So I hope you enjoy this. If you do, it'd be fantastic. It'd mean the world to me if you subscribe to this channel and hit the notification button so that when I post more videos you get to see them. So let's get cracking. I'm going to show you now how to make a rose bud, and for this you just need 2 little petals. These petals have been made just using 60 stitches around the outside. You need a sepal, you need your rose stem, and the secret ingredient is some cotton wool. You can actually use this method to make the centre of your rose if you wish, but I'll show you what you do then. So first of all, you're going to wrap your cotton wool around your stem to make a little bud shape in itself. So I'm going to start off just by putting a little tiny bit of hot glue on the end of that stick, and then this is the really fun bit. You stick your cotton wool to the end of your stem and wrap it around so it's sticking to that glue. This is a little bit like spinning crossed with making candy floss. I find it strangely satisfying. So that's the first layer. Something much like a bud at the moment, but we're just going to build it up a little bit more. So we're going to add another little layer of glue. And again, roll that glue in the cotton wool. It's going to look like a big earbud by the time we're finished. I'm just gently turning it round in my fingers and then trying to form it as best I can into a rosebud shape. Now in terms of size of this compared to your petals, I'm just pressing that really firmly now. You want it to be as long as your petal, so I've got a little bit way to go, and about half the thickness at its fattest point. So I'm just going to gradually build this up, adding a bit of glue, adding a little more cotton. This time I'm just going to concentrate on getting the cotton towards the base and leaving that point at the top. I know this doesn't look much like a rosebud at the moment, but trust me, it will do when we're finished. I'm just going to check the size again. The size is coming along nicely, as is the thickness of it. This way, the advantage of this way is that you don't use a lot of petals to get that middle section of your rose that you're not going to see. It does take time to make each of those rose petals, so they are quite precious. So you really want to use them for the elements that you're going to see rather than the bit that's in the centre. So this just saves you a little bit of time in terms of crocheting those inner rose petals. So I'm just going to gradually build that up. I think we're nearly there with this. Again, I'm just being wary that I don't burn myself, so I'm just taking my time and rolling this, pressing firmly till I'm getting something that resembles a rosebud. Checking my size again. I don't think that's far off. Yeah, I think I could live with that. I might just give it one tiny little sliver more. So we hot glue and a little tiny bit more of the cotton. Just going to roll that on my laminated surface, so burning my fingers. Spinning it round there, I've got something that looks like a rosebud. So now the next step is to take your two little rose petals, and what we're going to be doing here is a simple easy step to begin with, and that's we're going to stick these two petals together, and we're going to do that sticking them with the right side inwards. So on either side of that is the outside of each petal, and we're just going to glue down one of the edges. So I'll just do that now. A little bit of glue there. And stick those two petals together. I'll just give them a minute, well, a few seconds to stick. That's the benefit of using a hot glue gun. So we've then got the two petals stuck together, a little bit like opening up a book. Now that is still going to be your outside, so we're going to then be working on the inside to attach that cotton bud in a central rosebud. And I'm going to be placing that as we did when we were assembling the rose before, an inner line of glue down the centre, and then one that goes on the outer edge of this left-hand rose. I'm going to pop that glue on first. We add our cotton wool. Oh, no, now I don't want that popping out at the top, so just set it down so it's a little bit lower than the top of that petal, if you can see that. And then we're going to wrap that petal as tightly as we can around that cotton wool, cotton bud, going all the way down the stem. Not all the way down the stem, as far as we can go. So we're attaching that tightly to that cotton bud. I'm going to apply a little bit more glue there because I want to make sure that bit is attached as well at this point, so it's nice and neat. And at this point, because I know that's going to be hot, I'm just going to use a little bit of wire just to tease that in a little bit. There we go. So I'm shaping that as we go. And then this is the bit that will make the difference and make it look a lot more realistic. We're going to then wrap that second, the right hand petal, around that left hand petal so that we get a nice tight inner core, but it's overlapped if you look at the centre of a rose, that is a little bit more realistic as to what a real rose would look like. But the more you can get that rose, that second petal, overlapping that first, if you can see there, the more realistic it will be. So I'm just going to get my glue gun and apply some glue along the edge there, so that I can then pull that over really tightly, pressing it down, and get that lovely overlap. That's what we're looking for. So I'll just do that now, and then I'll show you the end result. So this bit, you want it as tightly wrapped as you possibly can. You want it to be all wound up. So I'm going to put a reasonable amount of glue on there. And then I'm really tightly wrapping that around that first petal, forming it as I go, making sure that it's all stuck down nicely. And we've then got a nice tight, neat central bit to the bud. What I end up probably doing at this point is to, once it's set a little bit, just shape it so that it is just as I would want it to be. Now you could, if you wish at this point, add another petal on the outer side. I'm not going to for this one. What I'm going to do now is to just finish this off by applying a little bit of stem tape to the bottom of this rose bud. Just a little bit to start with. And I'm going to apply just a tiny little bit more cotton to the base of the bud before I put the sepal on. It is only going to be a little bit because this is just a rosebud. So I'm just going to apply a little bit more cotton to the base. And what I'm doing this for is to shape the bottom bit of the sepal. I'm going to cover that up with a bit more of the stem tape, and I'm going to work that all the way down the stem before I then apply the sepal. For this, if you can see the shape of the sepal, oops, sorry, I've knocked my camera there. The shape of the sepal, you've got that little raised element in the centre, and that's what we're going to put over that little bit of cotton wool that we applied. So I'm just going to push that sepal in place. The base of it will cover that little bit of cotton that we added, so we get a nice shape at the bottom of the sepal. So I'm pleased with how that's going to be positioned, so I'm going to glue this in place now. Except I think my glue gun is out of charge. So I'm going to push that right down so the base of that sepal covers over that little bit of wool, cotton that we added to get the shape. And then because this is a rosebud, these sepals will be pretty much covering those petals that we've just put together. So for each one of those sepals now, I'm going to apply a little bit of glue to get them into place. And this time I'm going to put them right up to the top of the bud, because that's how each rose starts off, with the petals covered up by the sepals. And we're just working my way around here. Good old sepals will cover up any gaps between the ends of your petals. Nearly done. I'm just doing them one at a time so I can make sure I place them where I want them to be. And the final one. So we've got a nice neat base. We've got the sepals in position, covering the bottom of the bud, and it's just beginning to open, this rose is. We've got the bud there in place with the sepals around the edge. If I can show you that close up, forgetting where my camera is on my phone. And all we'd need to do then is to add some leaves to this, and that is a rose bud. I'm going to assemble the rose now, and I'm just going to show you the things that I use to do that. First of all, my trusty hot glue gun. This is my favourite at the moment, a Tech 30512 hot melt, mainly because of the stand. I've had several glue guns, I'm sure you have, when you use those little wire stands and they immediately collapse. This is fantastic, it's so sturdy, put it down, it's not going anywhere. I definitely recommend that. You'll need a flower stem, and I had been using this plastic coated wire, but when I come to look at the roses I've used this stem on, I think that it's a bit too thin. So I prefer using these. It's actually cane, a wooden stem from a local poundland, you would say. Perhaps it's like Dollar Tree in America, I'm not entirely sure, but they're flower sticks that you would use in the garden. This is a packet of 2 different sizes, 1 foot and 2 foot lengths, but you can snip them off easily with your scissors. So we need those flower stems. I've got all my petals lined up, painted or powdered, ready. I've got my sepal that's been prepared with the glue and powder technique at the end, hence why I've got green fingers. I've got my leaves all ready to go, and just in case I decide to use the technique of putting raindrops on, I have some sticky tack, some blue tack, some cocktail sticks, and some super glue. I like these little tiny mini super glues because the nozzle is so small and pointed, it's really precise. And I've got my box of raindrops ready to go. Only additional thing is, just in case, I've got a long wooden skewer, the sort that you get if you're doing barbecues, just to help hold things down so that I don't burn my fingers. So, and one final thing I almost forgot to say, I've got some cotton wool, and I've also got, I'll just get that for you, some spare yarn, and I'll show you what I'll do with that when we get to that step. Okay, so we're ready to go, and the first thing we're going to do is to make the inner section of the rose. So I'm going to take my 2 smallest petals here, and I'm going to glue them together to make that little bud the inner section of the rose. So to do that, I'm going to stitch those two sides together, and as you can see, these are the ones that I've added the colour definition just to the top. So we're putting right sides together, and I'm going to glue with my hot glue gun just down that top edge and then down that side. It doesn't need much glue, so I'm just going to put a little tiny bit just on that edge. Stick that together, hold it till it's really firmly together. And once it's stuck, we're going to open that out, turn it around, and then just flatten that edge. That's the pointy bit that we're going to be working to. So I'm going to, when we stick the stem on, it's going to be in that position there. But first, what we're going to do to that stem is to make the bud shape like we did when you're making just a rosebud on its own. So I'm just going to pop that down for a minute. I'm going to take some of the cotton wool, and this is the bit that is quite fun to do. It's a bit like a combination of weaving and mixing cotton candy, or candy floss as we would call it. So add a little bit of hot glue onto the end of your stick, and it is hot, so be careful. And then use that hot glue to grab some of this cotton wool and pull it as you're wrapping it round the tip of that stem. This is going to be hot, so just be careful as you're smoothing it down. And what I'm aiming for here is to try and get the shape of the inner bud of the rose. I'm going to add a little bit more glue on this next level, this next layer. You see that? Just grabbing the cotton wool with that hot glue and wrapping it around. I mean, that looks like a giant cotton bud at the moment. It doesn't look much like a rose bud or in a bit of the rose. So you just need to start to shape it. And all I'm doing here, a bit similar to what you would do if you were doing needle felting, I'm just applying a little bit of pressure to smooth that cotton wool into the shape that I want. It doesn't need to be too big because you're going to lay it on your inner petal like that, so it doesn't need to be too long. But what you want to do is to have a very pointed bit at the top, and then quite a fleshy chunky bit at the bottom. So I'm going to add a bit more. I'm going to really press that down so it's nice and firm. And I'm going to add another layer. Whoops! So here we go again. This will probably be the final layer for this rose centre, because it's not that big a rose. So again, pinch it really tight at the top and then work your way down, making sure you don't burn yourself on the hot glue. You don't have to do this bit, but I found it just helps to give a bit more of a shape to that inner bit of the rose. So really tight at the top, and then make sure it's a bit chunkier part way down. think that's just about there. So what I'm going to do now is to blob a little bit of glue in the centre of this petal and then place on, so where that point is at the top, that's where I'm going to line it up with. The bottom bit needs to be able to cover the bottom bit of that cotton, and the top bit you need a little bit of a gap because you want to make sure that you don't see any of that stem or cotton. And then all you're doing is, as tightly as you can, is to wrap this double petal around that cotton ball. Just to help us along the way, I'm going to put a little bit of hot glue on there. Pop that down. And then take that top bit and fold that over. Again, trying to make it as tight as possible at the top. Can you see the look that we're aiming for there? By doing that fold, it gives it that shape of that inner bit of the rose. So I'm just going to secure that with a little bit more adhesive. If you look at the centre of the rose, it's so intricate, it's fantastic, and this is the best way I've found to replicate that without having multiple layers of petals. So can you see that shape? And because we've put that little bit of colour on the edge, it really comes through. So that's your first layer done. So I'm now going to add the next layer, and I've got 3 petals here, these pink ones. For each of these, I'm going to just put the adhesive at the bottom of the petal. To add that first one, I'm going to place that where that join is there. That join is going to go down into the middle of that leaf. So there's your point of that bottom leaf, and you just wrap the bottom section of that petal around the little inner bud that you've made, so you've got that sort of a look. Now we've got 2 more petals to place on here, and what I've found with this first layer, because you've just got 3 petals, it's worthwhile just giving them a try out first before you do any sticking. And I've found with this, what you're looking for is to get each petal, so this first one here, I'd put on, so there's your pointy bit, is so you're actually, it's halfway along the petal below, the edge of that petal. And then the next one you put on, again, would be half the way along that bottom petal. So the next one would be half the way along that bottom petal. So can you see how that's building up? Looking good already. So there's my first one. I'm going to put the second one in the same way, just putting the hot glue on the bottom. And I'm placing it as I've described before, so that that edge comes about halfway to that petal that we put on first, and just gently squeeze that in position. And then we just need the final one. A little bit of glue there. And again, we're placing that on so that that edge comes to about the middle of that one, and it's gone the middle of the first one we did. I'm hoping that makes some sort of sense to you. Because I've done these proportions, these sizes, I know that this is going to work out, but if you were If you were doing this without that, then you'd need to make sure that when you're putting the petals together, they're all equal flat at the top, that you don't have the centre bit sticking out. I mean, that's quite cool just as it is. But we're going to add the next layer now. Same principle, we've got 3. This time we've got some wire around the outside, so when it's assembled, we'll be able to shape this. But again, where we've got that sort of join before, that's the one that I would place down into that petal. Again, squeeze it, we're just gluing it at the bottom, and then as you can see, once we've finished, we'll be able to shape these with the wire that we've put on. So we've got 3 of these again, so we're looking for the same sort of overlap. I'm just going to check, because with this one, because it's sort of on the outside of the one we've done before, we're not going right over to the centre. You're looking about 1/3 of the way along the petal for that overlap. So I'm going to start with this one. A little bit of glue. And then when we overlap it, I'm just going to go for about 1/3 of the way along. So not overlapping it right to the middle. And then the final one. Bit of glue. What would we do without our hot glue guns? And then that one where the gap is would go into there. And again, we sort of got that 1/3 of the way overlapping. I'm just holding that wire down for now. So as you can see, we're building that up. We'll be able to shape this petal because they've got the wire in. And we're going to add the final layer now. We've got 4 petals for this one, and this is where it's useful having that wire for this 4th layer, because we can place them, wrap that wire around so we can be absolutely sure that we've got them in the right position. What I tend to do with this outer layer, because there's 4, I put 2 sort of north and south, and then the other 2 east to west, if that makes sense to you. Then I know they're even, and each time I'm just wrapping that wire around just to hold it in place before I start to glue. So I'm just holding it quite firm and tightly together for now, although that won't be what the final element will be. Okay, so here's the thing that's just happened. I completed filming the assembling the rose in 2 stages. The first one you've just seen. The second stage, where I add the sepals and the leaves, that video has been totally corrupted. I can't recover it, so I can't redo that or show you what I've done. So what I'm going to show you now, I had luckily videoed assembling this green rose. So adding the sepals, wiring the leaves together and adding the leaves to the stem. So you'll see a not very subtle switch from starting off with a rose like this. I've just got to the stage where I was going to complete gluing that final layer with my hot glue gun, and then I was going to add the sepals and the leaves. So you won't see the finished assembly of this rose, but you'll see how I've done it for this rose. The technique is just exactly the same, but here's an explanation of why it switches from one colour to another. Thank you for bearing with me. Next step, adding the sepal to this rose. Before I do that, I'm going to apply a little bit of stem tape to the top of this rose. I just want to build up a little bit of definition at the top, so I'm going to apply a bit of stem tape initially to the top of that stem, and then I'm also going to add a little bit of cotton wool, we would call it. I don't know what you'd call it elsewhere, but cotton wool is what we would say here in the UK. I just want to build up a little bit of shape at the base that I'm then going to cover with a little bit more stem tape, but that's just to help shape the sepal so that it looks more realistic. So once that's done, a little bit more stem tape around the base of that sepal, as tight as I can near the top, but building up that shape a little bit, and then take your stem tape down, part way down the stem, and then we just need to add the sepal. So I'm going to add that to the stem. I'm going to apply a little bit of glue at the top, because we need to stick it in place on that little section that we've made from the cotton. I'm going to pull that sepal down so that it's really tightly up against the base of those petals, and we've then got the shape of the sepal partly caused by the crocheted pattern that we did, but also partly because of that build up of the cotton and the stem tape. And I'm now going to just stick the sepals in place, thinking all along that it is like a fully open rose. So most of the sepals will have curled over and be facing downwards. While I've still got some charge in my glue gun, I'm just going to glue these sepals in place, and I just need them to be stuck down so they cover up the gap and the base of those petals. I don't want them to stick them right up at the top of the petals, because that isn't what would happen in nature for a fully open rose. I just want to get them into the position I need them to be in to make sure that they're nice and secure. So just a little bob of glue, getting them in position. And for a fully open rose like this, the scraggier these sepals look, the better. I want them all sort of turning down, being all wiggly. I haven't pressed these, I haven't starched them, because I want them to be quite organic and a little bit past their best. So I think that's how I want them. So can you see how those sepals are falling down nicely? I know it's unusual to have a green rose, but I'm just showing you here different approaches that you can use. So that is fantastic. Now I'm pleased with that. Just need now to add the leaves. So to prepare the leaves, the first thing you need to do is to cover the wire of the leaf with stem tape. What I tend to do to make sure that this is as firm as possible is to just wrap one wire around the other twice at the very top of the wire stem before I start to wind my tape up. And part of the reason is because I'm going to cut off one of those 2 pieces of wires, so I haven't got a thick stem to this leaf. So I want to make sure that the top of the leaf, where it joins the leaf stem, that wire is going to stay in place. So before I go any further, I'm going to snip off one of these 2 wires here. And then continue down that leaf stem with the stem tape so that it's all nicely covered up. At this point I should say I'm not a florist, I'm not a flower ranger. This is just something I've picked up from watching my mum do flower ranging in the past. So there we have the leaf. The stem is quite thin because we're going to be overlaying a few of these, so we don't want them to be too thick, but it's quite firm at the top and it's not going to come undone. So when you think about a rose leaf, if I can show you how I've laid this out here. If you look at how the leaves of the rose are formed in nature, you have 1 leaf at the top, 2 a little bit further down, quite close to that's the stem, and then 2 more a little bit further down. So that means that for each stem of leaves you're going to need 5 leaves. Now that's an awful lot of crocheting, especially if you have 2 of these patterns per rose. It looks just fine with 3, so if you want to just do 3, then that's no problem at all. I'm going to do 5 now just to show you how I assemble them. So I'm going to start then, I'm just going to lay them out on my table surface. If you've got a variation in size of leaves, then you'd put your bigger leaf, one that's slightly bigger, right at the top. And then I'm going to put the 2 that are going to come after, one on top of the other, and I'm going to lay them on top of that leaf, but the base then is about 2 centimetres from the base of that top leaf. So if you can see, I've got 2 leaves together, and the top one, the bottom one, is about 2 centimetres further up than the other leaves. I'm then going to bind these together. And they need to be bound together quite close to the base of those top 2 leaves, because what they don't do is to stick out on the leaf stem. I don't know what we would call that. So probably about 1/2 centimetre, no more than that, from the base of those top leaves. I'm going to apply some stem tape to bind those together. I've only just done that a little bit at the top. I haven't gone all the way down that stem yet. One, because I want to make sure they're in the right position, and also, a bit like what we did with the individual leaf, I want to trim off some of these stems. We don't need all 3. So once you've got those there, you can move one leaf to one side, the other leaf to the other side, and lo and behold, you've then got the beginnings of your rose leaves. So I'm going to go ahead and add the 2 more leaves, and I'll do that in a similar way to how I did the top ones, but I'm going to get rid of 2 of these wires. I'm going to leave the longest one in place, get rid of the other 2. And then these leaves will go on again. If we pop these back to where they were before. I'm going to place these other 2 leaves, again about 2 centimetres from the base of those last 2 leaves. So that's where the base ends, about 1-2 centimetres down. I'm going to place those. To hold those in place to start with, I just want to check whether that's I think I'm going to do that 3 centimetres down, so I've got enough room. I've got a feeling that that's going to be better. Hold them in position and then tape them with my stem tape. If any of you are professional florists, flower arrangers, if you've got any tips on how I do this professionally and easily than I'm doing here, I'm more than grateful for you to let me know. So just before I complete that stem, I'm going to get rid of a couple of these wires so that we haven't got too thick a stem to put in position when we attach it to the rose finally. So I'm going to continue all the way down there, and I'm going to, just for luck, give it one more pass round, particularly because I can see that it's a bit thicker here where we've got all the wires joined together, so I want to even that out a little bit by putting some more stem tape down here. So when that's in place, we've got a little row of leaves. The top one, 2 together where the base is about 1 centimetre down from the first one. The second 2 together, but I've left a little bit more, about 3 centimetres from the base of that. Let's just see if this is going to work now. So there's the bottom leaves. We've got the top leaves, and we've got the one that's on its own at the top. I think that's looking pretty much like a lot of rose leaves. To add it to the stem, it's very similar to how we've assembled those leaves individually. Having checked out how the rose leaves look on a real rose, we need to leave about, I would say, the length of your thumb between the base of the sepal and where you're going to put the leaves. And a bit similar to what we've done before, I'm going to attach that in place with the stem tape. Just want to make sure I'm getting it in the position I need. So we're going down about a thumb's length from the base of the sepal, and we're going about a half a thumb length from the base of the leaves. I think my stem tape has lost its sticky here, so about that distance and that distance, and we're going to apply some stem tape to hold these together. Again, I'm not a florist or a flower arranger. I bet there's some flower arrangers out there that are cringing with what I'm doing at the moment. I'm very grateful for any advice on how I do this more professionally. All I'm doing now then is, in my own clumsy way, attaching that first lot of leaves onto those. And apologies, that's my dog Ted, seeing something he doesn't like. So to prepare the leaves, the first thing you need to do is to cover the wire of the leaf with stem tape. What I tend to do to make sure that this is as firm as possible is to just wrap one wire around the other twice at the very top of the wire stem before I start to wind my tape up. And part of the reason is because I'm going to cut off one of those two pieces of wires, so I haven't got a thick stem to this leaf. So I want to make sure that the top of the leaf, where it joins the leaf stem, that wire is going to stay in place. So before I go any further, I'm going to snip off one of these two wires here. And then continue down that leaf stem with the stem tape so that it's all nicely covered up. At this point I should say I'm not a florist, I'm not a flower ranger. This is just something I've picked up from watching my mum do flower ranging in the past. So there we have the leaf. The stem is quite thin because we're going to be overlaying a few of these, so we don't want them to be too thick, but it's quite firm at the top and it's not going to come undone. So when you think about a rose leaf, if I can show you how I've laid this out here. If you look at how the leaves of the rose are formed in nature, you have one leaf at the top, two a little bit further down, quite close to that's the stem, and then two more a little bit further down. So that means that for each stem of leaves you're going to need 5 leaves. Now that's an awful lot of crocheting, especially if you have 2 of these patterns per rose. It looks just fine with 3, so if you want to just do 3, then that's no problem at all. I'm going to do 5 now just to show you how I assemble them. So I'm going to start then, I'm just going to lay them out on my table surface. If you've got a variation in size of leaves, then you'd put your bigger leaf, one that's slightly bigger, right at the top. And then I'm going to put the 2 that are going to come after, one on top of the other, and I'm going to lay them on top of that leaf, but the base then is about 2 centimetres from the base of that top leaf. So if you can see, I've got 2 leaves together, and the top one, the bottom one, is about 2 centimetres further up than the other leaves. I'm then going to bind these together. And they need to be bound together quite close to the base of those top 2 leaves, because what they don't do is to stick out on the leaf stem. I don't know what we would call that. So probably about half a centimetre, no more than that, from the base of those top leaves. I'm going to apply some stem tape to bind those together. I've only just done that a little bit at the top. I haven't gone all the way down that stem yet. One, because I want to make sure they're in the right position, and also, a bit like what we did with the individual leaf, I want to trim off some of these stems. We don't need all 3. So once you've got those there, you can move one leaf to one side, the other leaf to the other side, and lo and behold, you've then got the beginnings of your rose leaves. So I'm going to go ahead and add the 2 more leaves, and I'll do that in a similar way to how I did the top ones, but I'm going to get rid of 2 of these wires. I'm going to leave the longest one in place, get rid of the other 2. And then these leaves will go on again if we pop these back to where they were before. I'm going to place these other 2 leaves again about 2 centimetres from the base of those last 2 leaves. So that's where the base ends, about 1-2 centimetres down. I'm going to place those. To hold those in place to start with, I just want to check whether that's I think I'm going to do that 3 centimetres down, so I've got enough room. I've got a feeling that that's going to be better. Hold them in position and then tape them with my stem tape. If any of you are professional florists, flower arrangers, if you've got any tips on how I do this professionally and easily than I'm doing here, I'm more than grateful for you to let me know. So just before I complete that stem, I'm going to get rid of a couple of these wires so that we haven't got too thick a stem to put in position when we attach it to the rose finally. So I'm going to continue all the way down there, and I'm going to, just for luck, give it one more pass round, particularly because I can see that it's a bit thicker here where we've got all the wires joined together, so I want to even that out a little bit by putting some more stem tape down here. So when that's in place, we've got a little row of leaves. The top one, 2 together where the base is about 1 centimetre down from the first one. The second 2 together, but I've left a little bit more, about 3 centimetres from the base of that. Let's just see if this is going to work now. So there's the bottom leaves. We've got the top leaves, and we've got the one that's on its own at the top. I think that's looking pretty much like a lot of rose leaves. To add it to the stem, it's very similar to how we've assembled those leaves individually. Having checked out how the rose leaves look on a real rose, we need to leave about, I would say, the length of your thumb between the base of the sepal and where you're going to put the leaves. And a bit similar to what we've done before, I'm going to attach that in place with the stem tape. Just want to make sure I'm getting it in the position I need. So we're going down about a thumb's length from the base of the sepal, and we're going about a half a thumb length from the base of the leaves. I think my stem tape has lost its sticky here, so about that distance and that distance, and we're going to apply some stem tape to hold these together. Again, I'm not a florist or a flower arranger. I bet there's some flower arrangers out there that are cringing with what I'm doing at the moment. Very grateful for any advice on how I do this more professionally. All I'm doing now then is, in my own clumsy way, attaching that first lot of leaves onto those. And apologies, that's my dog Ted seeing something he doesn't like. So, assembly of our rose. Hello, I'm going to show you now how to make the raindrops for the roses, and I'm going to do this using UV resin. You can use other types of resin. Normally resin comes in 2 bottles like this, and you measure out very carefully a portion of each of these 2 products, exactly the same amount, mix them together. And that forms your resin. If you've got that, that's perfectly fine. You can use that to make raindrops. But I find this just so easy because it comes ready-made. It is activated by UV light. I'm from the UK, and the first time I used this, I just left it to dry in my dining room, and it took about a couple of days. Earlier on this year, we had some sunshine. I did this outside and it dried virtually instantly. So it does need to be somewhere where it can get those UV rays. And all you do is simply to squeeze it onto a little plastic bag. If you get any products that come with these little plastic bags, just save them because they're ideal for this. And I'm just going to drip the resin on the plastic bags, trying to emulate raindrops. I might do it from high up. You want them in different sizes. The little ones are good. Just do them like that. There's no particular expert way of doing these, other than on one little sheet of paper you can do as many raindrops as you can fit, and it's likely to be sufficient to cover several different roses. So you just carry on dabbing the resin, and then I'm going to drip it from high just to see what effect that gets us. I've tried doing this on tin foil, that definitely doesn't work, and I've tried doing it directly. I'll show you what happens if I do it directly onto, this is cotton yarn. If I were to try and put a rose drop on the cotton yarn, it'll start to dissolve into the yarn. Can you see it sort of changing colour? It sort of dissolves into the yarn. You don't get that lovely opaque or transparent even raindrop. You do if you pop it on this plastic sheeting. If you can see, it does look, it's fantastic, so satisfying. It just looks as though this has been sprinkled with water. That'll be enough for now. Hope you can, I think you can see that in the shot. I'll just lift it up a little bit there in this light. Now I just need to make sure they are in a direct UV light to see how long it takes to set, and I'll let you know how long that takes. Well, I've just taken these to the window behind me, and I just checked to see how they were going on. So that was within seconds of completing the act of putting them on this paper, and they've already set. So definitely you need to make sure you've got some good UV light, and they will set straight away. And what you need to do when they set is simply just to pop them off. And I keep them in a separate little box ready for when I need to apply them to my roses. I'm going to leave those a minute or two just to be absolutely sure. And then I've got another bag here that I've got some more on. I can tell the difference. Those ones that I've just made, when you touch them, they're still quite warm. It must be the act of the resin reacting with the UV light. These that I've made for weeks and cold, and they just peel off this plastic bag very, very simply. And I just keep them in a little box. A box of raindrops. That's a good title for a novel. Until I'm ready to use them. So there's the raindrops. Once you've made your raindrops, and here's some I've made earlier, stuck to this plastic sheeting. All you need to do next is to peel a few off here, and they come off really easily, and collect them ready to assemble on your rose. So I've got a few here, if you can see, on this tissue paper, all ready to roll. I find it easier to get a few ready in advance, and I've positioned my rose so that I can see it from above, so I can get a better feel for where the raindrops are going to go. And to adhere the raindrops to the rose, I'm using some really sophisticated equipment. First of all is some super glue, and I tend to get these little tiny tubes of it, so that once you've used it a couple of times, if it starts to dry up and you can't squeeze it out of the nozzle, you haven't lost a lot of glue. So these little ones are absolutely perfect for applying the glue in a very precise area. In addition to that, and here's where the sophistication comes in, I use some blue tack or any other brand of this sticky stuff. Squeeze a little bit of it into a cylinder, and you also need a cocktail stick. So all I'm going to do is to grab one of the raindrops, and here's one. If I show it up close, I think you can see the shape of it. It looks like a contact lens, and that's the shape you need, and you're going to apply a little blob of this super glue, just a tiny bit, to the top of that raindrop, and then we're going to adhere it to the rose. I'm going to do this one to one of the leaves so you can see it, and the cocktail stick is there just to help you to prise that off your bit of blue tack. I'll do that one more time, but as you can see, it's not terribly difficult. Fiddly at best, but not particularly difficult. I'm hoping you can see that and it's in focus for you. You're looking for the upside down section of the raindrop. And go in, this time I think I'm going to put one on this sepal here. And I'll use that cocktail stick just to prise it off. And I'm going to leave that to dry. You'll see that for now you could probably see where that super glue is, but it does dry clear. If I can just try to catch the light so you can see it. It does dry clear. On this rose, I've already added a few to the leaves. I think you can see those there, and some to the petals. I'm trying to get a good view for you without making you feel seasick by moving the camera around a lot. I'm just going to zoom perhaps out a little bit and see if you can see the effect of that. I think you get the picture. You apply those little raindrops to wherever you think looks good. There's no rhyme or reason to it. It's random, which is where I tend to struggle doing random things. But that just adds another little dimension to your raindrops. I think it gives a really pretty look. So that concludes assembling your roses. So that's the end of this 5th tutorial, showing you how to assemble all the elements of the rose together. And if you do that, as I've shown you in these videos, you can end up with realistic looking roses like this, which I think are fantastic, for example, for a keepsake for a wedding present. Your wedding floral arrangements always fade, these never will. You can have them as a gift for somebody's anniversary or birthday, or just use them for your home decor. I've enjoyed doing the crocheting, doing the filming, and video editing has been a nightmare. It's definitely not a good combination, having a middle-aged woman and technology she's not used before. So it has been a really learning experience for me. I've certainly learned a lot. I hope you've learned a lot as I've shared with you the tips and tricks that I've picked up over the last few months when developing how to crochet these roses. I don't know about you, but now it's over, I'm going to sit down and have a nice cup of tea. Thanks for watching. Subscribe if you wish. I would love that. Hit that notification button and you can watch me struggle through the next lot of videos. Thank you for watching.